Hola querida gente del Mundo Whisky, bueno, una mañana muy tempranito, muy fresca. Nos despertamos en Campbelltown a las 5 de la mañana y estamos viniendo para Islay, para recorrer destilerías de esta zona, de gente muy amiga. Nos cruzaremos por un instante a la isla de Jura también, a ver a mi querido amigo Willy Cochrane, que me va a estar esperando, a pesar de que vive en Islay, se va a correr hasta allá para encontrarse con nosotros. Recorreremos Kilchoman, Arnajó, Bruichladdich y otras tantas más destilerías de esta región. Así que acompáñenos porque tenemos varios programas de Mundo Whisky. Querida gente del Mundo Whisky, llegamos a Kilchoman, al fin en Islay nosotros. Vamos a brindar con Sanay, un producto que importamos para la Whisky Malt Argentina. A la querida gente del Mundo Whisky, lleva.
The barley gets germinated there for 6 days. We then put it on the floor of the kiln. It's still very moist, still very damp, and then we light the peat fire. So this is how we get the typical characteristics from Islay whiskey from the peat, because the peat here on Islay is very salty, it's very briny, we're on the west coast of Scotland and there's a lot of salt in the air. So it has this particular pungent characteristics we impregnate the grains with, and then that translates into the whiskey once we've bottled it. So this is very important in terms of the character of our own barley that we grow here on the farm. So we grow the barley, we malt it on the malt floor here, and then we bottle it all as 100% Islay, which is our unique and flagship expression, which we are the only distillery that grows, malts, distills, matures and bottles its own whiskey on site, and that is what Kilchoman is about. So this is not practiced in many distilleries now. There's two others on Islay, Lafroig and Beaumont, that still do their own traditional floor maltings, but everybody else now buys commercial malt in, because now the industry is very large and this art is sadly no longer really practiced by many distilleries. But we feel it's very important here at Kilchoman to showcase something that's completely different from the mainstream distilleries that you visit on your tour around Scotland. So this is where the 4 tons of barley lies on a perforated floor, and you can see the smoke, the peat smoke coming up through the bed, and that will impregnate the grains with peat smoke and peat reek, which will translate through production into the end product. And as I say, we keep this fire going all day. We're not looking for drying it down, we're looking for as much smoke and as much peat reek as we possibly can get through the bed. First still house is the still house we put in 2005, and in April, May this year we completed the second still house, and we've increased production by 100%. So in one side in last year we produced 230,000 litres of alcohol, but if we have 2 still houses running alongside each other 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, we can produce close to 500,000 litres of alcohol now. So that gives us a huge amount more potential to have stock to share around the world, and if we'd continued just with that still house, we would have had to allocate stock in the next 5, 6, 7 years. So it was important to invest now for the future growth of the business, and sales are going reasonably well. So we completed this phase in May, and we're now running both still houses separately, but we collect the spirit together. So we've now got 12 washbacks when we only had 6, and we operate them separately, but we collect the spirit because the stills are the same shape and size, and the mash tun is also the same shape and size, and we've got another 6 washbacks. So the easiest way for us to have increased production would have been to build a new distillery with bigger stills, but we would have changed the character of the spirit that we were making, and we didn't want to change the character because everyone knew Kilchoman for the typical style of spirit and of whiskey, so we wanted to maintain that going forward because we built our reputation on the character and quality of a spirit. So that's why we then built a replica still house to the one over here. This is a 1.2 ton mash. So the first water is now on. We put 1.2 tons into the mash tun and then add the water. Everyone does the same process. You just tweak things to do things slightly differently so that you are unique in what you do. So we're just to put the rake on now. The water's gone on, the first water, and we're just putting the rake on to go round a couple of times just to loosen it all up, and then allow the warts to drain down through the bed of grist, and then we start collecting it in our balance tube and then pump it away at 20 degrees to our washbacks. We do 20 mashes a week now, 10 on each side, you know, we're pretty busy. We start at 6 o'clock in the morning and we finish at 9 o'clock in the evening. So the process is pretty similar in every distillery. Yeast varieties are different. Times to allow it to settle before you drain, how fast you drain your worts, whether you want a clear worts or a hazy worts, is all determined by each distillery and makes each distillery's spirit unique. The shapes and sizes of the stills play a massive part as well. We have quite a small spirit run. The stills, as you see, are quite small, so we only charge 3,000 litres to our wash still here and 1,700 litres to our spirit still. The shape and size of our spirit still is unique to Kilchoman, and every distillery has a uniqueness about their stills, which then determines the character of the spirit that they're going to collect and then the end whiskey that they produce. We have a tall, narrow neck. We have a boil bulb to add more reflux. We distill very slowly, and therefore only the lighter, fruitier alcohols will be collected as spirit, and then the heavier congeners will fall down into the pan of the still and not be collected. We wanted a lighter, fruitier style of spirit, so we could then mature it relatively quickly. We're not suggesting that our 4, 5, 6-year-old whiskey is going to be better than our 10 or 12-year-old, but it allowed us to release young age single malt that's been very well received in the market because of the character and the style of our spirit at this stage of the process. So the guys need to be very vigilant when they're distilling. We do the same process every day. They have to stick to that rigidly, but they have to watch everything very carefully to make sure that the spirit character is what we're looking for. So this is our spirit. It's from the cut, and if you pass it round, you'll notice it's very fruity and it's very sweet and clean. And being clean and fruity and sweet means that if you put it into good quality wood, you can mature it into something relatively good at a young age, but it's got a freshness and a fruitiness about it. So the character of your spirit is key. It doesn't mean if it's off notes or it's fainty in character, it's going to be a bad whiskey. It just might mean you need to wait a little longer for it to mature into something that's going to be good. So this character of spirit allows us to mature it relatively quickly. And we buy all our barrels from one supplier in America, Buffalo Trace Distillery, owned by Sazerac, and we buy all our sherry casks from one supplier in Spain, in the south of Spain, called Miguel Martin. And then you get continuity, you get consistency of casks, and we'd be very fortunate that the casks we buy from those two main suppliers have always been very, very good. We fill mainly into bourbon, probably 70% into bourbon, 20 to 25% into sherry, and then we do fill other cask types for full maturation. So we experiment with different cask types: Madeira, port, rum, cognac, red wine, We filled all sorts of different casks, and we'll continue that process because we always want to release something that has a complete uniqueness about it. We released an STR cask, shaved, toasted and recharred cask, which are ex-wine casks, and that is won huge praise around the whisky community for its character, and it's 7 years of age. So our cut point here is 5 minutes on 4 shots, and then we switch to collecting the spirit. We run the spirit probably for about an hour and a half maximum. The strength is about 75%, and we cut it at 65.5%, depending on the temperature and the time of year with the distilling. We do 3 charges of stills a day, and we do 2 mashes or 1 mash, depending on the day or the cycle, a day as well. So the guys are kept pretty busy in here, and we're in production 50 weeks of the year. And that allows us to produce, now it allows us to produce in the region of about 500,000 litres of alcohol a year, which if you translate that into bottles of whiskey at 46%, we're talking about 1.2 million bottles. So it's an awful lot of single malt whiskey that we're producing, and we don't sell, as I said earlier, we don't sell any of our whiskey in bulk to the blend market. The blend market still is the major contribution in terms of sales. It's 90%, roughly 88 to 90% of all whiskey sold around the world is blended, and 10%, 12% is single malt. That's grown over the last sort of decade or so. It's growing and it's becoming increasingly important to the industry. Obviously, there's more money in malt than there is in blends. Blends are hugely competitive and very price driven, whereas single malt you have more flexibility with your pricing. And single malt, as everybody knows, has become very, very popular around the world and has grown considerably in the last few years. Hence the reason we built this distillery in 2005, and 14 years in, we're delighted with the reaction we've been getting. We do have 2 different malts. We buy a commercial malt from Kilchoman, from Port Ellen Maltings, which you probably pass or you will pass when you're here on Islay, which is owned by Diageo, and we buy a malting spec which is the same as Ardbegs at 50 parts per million of phenols. Now that represents about 65% of our production is from commercial malt, and then the balance is from barley we grow ourselves, and it's at the lighter end of the peating spectrum, which is 10 to 20 parts per million of phenols. All right, so we have 2 different styles which you'll try when we go into the tasting room. But we bring the malt, which we have 2 huge bins around the back, and through this mill, which is an old Porteous roller mill, which sadly are no longer made. They made them so well that they didn't break down, so other people now make mills. We managed to find an old traditional mill, which we look after very carefully, and this mills all our grain. So the 1.2 tonne passes through the mill up into a grist bin, which is those 2 bins through in the other room, and 1 bin is for this side of the still house and the other is for the other side. We put all our 100% Islay, all the barley that we grow and malt ourselves, through one side of the still house, through there, and everything from the commercial malt goes through this side. So we originally started with 4 washbacks, and then we added another 2 so that we could go to full production in the first half, the old still house, and then we recently added another 6. So these are stainless steel, and wooden washbacks are obviously traditionally what have been used throughout the industry, but stainless steel do the same job. The only issue you might have is insulation in terms of temperature control, but here on Islay we have a very mild climate. It never gets that cold, and we've never had an issue with the washbacks getting too cold. But these are easy to clean and maintain, and they last a lot longer. Fermentation can get quite violent at the early stages, so you want to control that and make sure it doesn't all come out over the top. So the switcher will go around in the first 12 to 24 hours just to keep it suppressed so it doesn't come up over the top of the washback. We use 1 variety of yeast at the moment, though we are experimenting with different types of yeast. I think one thing that hasn't really been spoken about a lot is different yeast varieties produce a different character of spirit, and it's like bread. You make bread with different yeast, you'll have a different character of bread. So it's the same with spirit. I think what the industry has done is use a yeast that gives them the best results. And you can argue that that is absolutely fine, and that it means that you maintain a consistency and the yields, and you'll get what you're looking for. But we're looking at different yeast varieties. I think it's all very well with different yeast varieties through the process, and when you taste the spirit, you will certainly taste a different character from different yeast varieties. We've done a tasting recently, and they were all very different, 4 different yeast strains. The issue is when you put it into cask, you lose some of that character from the different yeast strains quite dramatically in cask because of the impact the cask will have. So although it's quite interesting to do, and a lot of the whisky enthusiasts enjoy that sort of thing, we'll continue to do that. It's like we've grown different strains of barley, and we will process them separately and see what results we get from those. So it's something the industry is looking at more closely. It's not all about just economies of scale and just producing spirit at the same style all the time. We are a small and flexible company that can experiment a bit more than the large companies, and we'll continue to do that and put forward arguments for what we're doing and why we're doing it. We reduced the strength from an average of 70% down to 63.5. That's to give it a kickstart in maturation. And these are first fill bourbon barrels from Buffalo Trace Distillery, which give us this wonderful fruity caramel, butterscotch, vanilla characteristics coming through. Lemon and citrus notes are something that we are famous for at Kilchoman, and they work very well, and we've used them from day one. We fill them once more because we're filling them relatively young, so there's still a huge amount of character still left in these casks. So we fill them once more, and then we sell them into the industry. We do that because that suits us. A lot of distilleries will be filling them maybe 2 or 3 times, and maybe they're 10 or 12 years before they empty them for the first time. So every distillery will have a different plan. If you use a refill cask, it takes longer for it to mature out into something that's good and characterful. What we do here is with first fill give us this wonderful character early on, and obviously we're filling and bottling at a younger age, and that suits us at the moment. As time goes by, we'll probably change our filling regime and maybe have more refills to take our whisky further out in the years to come. So we fill on average about 70, the equivalent of 70 bourbon barrels a week now, whereas we were filling roughly about 35, 36. So these casks here, actually, you'd think they're butts, but they're not, they're puncheons. And puncheon is similar size, but it's not as fat, it's more elegant, narrow and taller. These are actually ex-Muscatel de Setúbal, sweet white wine from Portugal. And we're experimenting with them. We bought 25 just to see how they do. We've done Sauterne casts and they work pretty well, and so we thought we'd try these. We don't know how they're going to work, and it's one of the fascinations for us is to try different things. If it doesn't work, we'll think of something. So we're just filling these as well, and these are 500 barrel litres, whereas the bourbon barrels are 200 barrel litres, so it's quite a big difference, and these are much more expensive. Bourbon barrels will be around about 120 pounds sterling delivered here from America. These can be anything from 600 to 800 pounds each, so there's a little bit of difference there. But we're filling twice a week now, now that we've got the new still house running. And the other important thing that we felt that we needed to do is control every aspect of production right the way through to bottling. So we do all our own bottling here as well. And this year we'll be sending about 300,000 bottles of Kilchoman single malt around the world. And we control that, and everything's bottled and sent away around the world from here, from the distillery. We employ 5 people. So we have a semi-automatic 4-head filler, and then we have automatic corking machine, an automatic capping machine, and an automatic labelling machine. And then we put all the whiskey goes into an individual carton, gift carton, and then into outer cases and away. Our bottle is unique to Kilchoman. We had it designed and produced specifically for Kilchoman. No one else can use our bottle, and the label is also pretty unique to us. And we do regular releases, regular malts, as well as single casks and special bottlings. We vat everything here. So these two vats behind you hold all our liquid, where we reduce from the cask strength down to the bottling strength, and we empty the casks into the trough here, and then we pump them into one of these vats. We rummage them, and then we then reduce them down to the bottling strength using mineral spring water off the hill. So normally we're selling at 46%. That's without chill filtration and without colouring. So all the colour that you will see in our bottles comes from the cask it's matured in. So no caramel is added. Now that's been done in the industry for years and years, but if you're trying to standardise a product like, say, Lefroy, I'm just picking out a name, it's not, all the standard 10-year-old bottlings tend to be at 40 or 43%. They will have been chill filtered, and a little bit of colour, caramel colouring would have been added so that they remain consistent in colour and character. And you can understand that. I mean, I understand if you go and buy a bottle of Bowmore 10-year-old or Ardbeg 10-year-old, you don't want it to be changing dramatically each time you do that. So that's why it's done. But we don't need to do that. We do it all in batch system. They will be slightly different each batch we do, though we try and keep our Macchia Bay and our Saneg, which are our two core expressions, relatively similar. But we're not bothered if it's slightly different in colour or character, but it's pretty much the same. But we believe in being transparent. Adding colour, caramel colouring adds sweetness to the whiskey, and chill filtration strips out the proteins that cause a haze in the bottle. So if you have it in a shop under lights and it heats up, then the haze will appear in the bottle. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't look great. So that's why chill filtration strips out that by taking it below freezing before they bottle. But you're stripping out some of the character, the proteins in the whiskey. So a lot of distilleries now are bottling at a higher strength, so you don't have to chill filter, and you certainly don't add any caramel colouring. All the independent bottlers and a lot of the smaller distilleries will be doing that going forward, and we certainly do that. We have two core expressions, which is Macchia Bay, which is the core expression at the most competitively priced, which we push sales on. And we encourage all our distributors to really push that hard. It's 90% bourbon, 10% sherry maturation at 4, 5, and a little bit of 6-year-old at 46%. We then have a Saneg, which is 70% sherry cask matured and 30% bourbon, and it's about £10 a bottle more expensive. But those two are the ones that we push. And then each year we have 4 limited releases, which we say, right, there's 12,000 bottles of that worldwide, and we allocate it to our distributors. We always release Loch Gorm, which is our 100% sherry matured every year, 15,000 bottles. And this year we had the STR, shaved, toasted and recharred. Now what I mean by that is this is an ex-red wine cask from Portugal that has had all the toasting shaved off. It's been recharred and retoasted to give it a more complexity and freshness, to rejuvenate it in some way and give it another characteristics. And this is something we always do, which is single cask, selected from the warehouse, filled as an individual cask, 240 odd bottles, and it's unique at cask strength at 56.4%. And to my mind, cask strength whiskies are the ones that you should be buying, because you're in control of how you taste them and drink them, because at that strength you need to add a little bit of water, but some of you might need more water than others. At 46%, you can argue the dilution's already been done, and therefore you don't need to add any more water. But certainly at cask strength, you are in control of your own destiny in terms of the character that you want to end up with. We're delighted that we're now represented in South America and Argentina in particular. We hope that we can build a relationship going forward and that Kilchoman can be well represented by yourselves in the market in Argentina in future years.